I think Doron is such a cool name because I watched Fauda.
Yeah.
And I love that character, Doron.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Fauda, the guys, I know the people that know the producers.
Yeah, you do.
Mm-hmm.
Roland, by the way, I just do it like this informally.
Cool.
Yeah. Do you know the producers of it?
Yeah, well, not the producers directly. I know the people are friends of theirs who have operated with them in the past.
Yeah.
Because we have a lot of overlap in the Special Forces community.
Yeah.
And so it's just like a fun fact that during the war, one of them said to me, that's good friends with those guys. He goes, yeah, I need to connect you with them sometime, and it'd be cool. Maybe, do some kind of project together or something. I'm just like, sure, yeah, because they did a really good job. They did a really good job of giving a small, what people don't understand. It's like, it's not fully the capabilities of what those guys do, but just giving you a small insight into what it is they do and also what they're up against. And unfortunately, October 7th manifested itself in these scenarios that you see in the show that I remember in some cases I thought, nah, they don't have those capabilities, and so anyone who's a fan of the show, you'll understand what I'm talking about. They kind of give you some kind of potential scenarios of these terrorists that you're just like, nah, that's no way. And what they really were doing is they were giving the public a small taste of, no, this is what these guys are capable of,
wow.
Or at least what they're planning and wanting. And that's what I told Jack Carr when I spoke to him before we got live for the podcast deal. That he invited me after the first 2 weeks of the war. He said they reached out to me and said, would you come on the podcast to share some of what's happening in Israel? Because I think they realized that there was a lot of misinformation in the U.S. And so in our little short conversation, I of course, I told him, I said, I'm a great fan and everything, and I have all your book series, and I've been following this character in your book series. And I said, what was crazy to me is that when you had a scenario that was that had unfolded in an attack from Iranian-trained terrorists in a northern community in the north of Israel, and then that our Yamam went to engage with those terrorists, and then this huge number of casualties for the Yamam. I told him, I said, when I read that part of your book, because most of what he because it's fiction, but most of it is like very, very, he does intertwine a lot of reality in there, real scenarios, if you will, having a former Navy SEAL background for anyone who's not familiar with the series. So when he retired, he got into book writing and whatnot. And so I had to tell him, I said, when I read that, I was like, that's way too outlandish.
Yeah.
And then I was like, well, here we are having this, me trying to tell you what it's like to be living through this impossible reality that's just slapped us in the face.
It's crazy.
And I said, it's surreal. I just can't believe it. And it's worse than what you depicted in your book.
Yeah.
Actually.
Yeah, it's crazy because I've also talked to other people from like Shin Bet and IDF, and I've asked them about particularly that series, Fauda. Is it realistic? Is it like that? And so, yeah, that's actually the most realistic depiction of what it's like in the Israeli armed forces and special forces. So
yeah, that's
so interesting. And also I remember I read an interview, I think it was, with the producers behind Fauda, and they were talking about that latest, that, what do you call that, that operation when the IDF actually managed to save some hostages from Hamas. And they said that the level of complexity and how advanced that operation was, they couldn't even dream up that, because if they were to produce that, then the audience wouldn't believe it. Like, it was too far out. Like, exactly. That would never happen.
Exactly. In fact, I'm glad you brought that up, because that is one of the points that I like to make for people to try to understand, that right now Israel is up against the most complex warfare that any warfighter has had to fight against terrorism, in the most complex battlefield, battle space, being within the very heart of a heavily civilian populated area, that the terrorists they're dictating this. They're breaking international law. They're the ones who are committing war crimes by drawing the military into those areas, because that's what they want. They want to have the highest civilian casualty, which is another thing that the Al-Qaeda front against Al-Qaeda and ISIS, that the special forces and the greater military armed forces of the West have been fighting in Iraq and in Afghanistan. They have never faced a militant who is as crazy and willing to sacrifice their own people for the cause, to make the Americans look bad, or the British, or whoever, that unit, that force being representing the West, that in carrying out those operations to take out the terrorists, they weren't willing to pay that sacrifice, although they did still endanger their civilians, but not at the same level of intently making sure that we push civilians into where the military is not going to retaliate, right? Mm. And so that's one of the huge complexities. Then there's the underground tunnel system, which is about 40. So you're looking at 42 kilometers is the length of Gaza, and about, let's say 12, 14 kilometers wide at its width, the widest. And in that small strip of geography, you have over 640 kilometers of underground tunnel system. Like, let that sink in for a minute. So this is what the operators, myself and all who are fighting in Gaza, the armed forces, are up against. And then you have this miraculous hostage rescue that is unprecedented in the history of hostage rescue. Like, trust me, I've studied this, different hostage rescue missions in the past. I've read up on all the special forces missions from anybody and everybody you like, including our own, which, of course, the Entebbe raid was the most historic, I would say, up to that point.
I watched that movie yesterday, by the way.
Entebbe. Yeah.
Amazing.
Exactly. So think about the complexity of Entebbe. Mm-hmm. And then now we have set another record for the Special Forces community in hostage rescue, that a new standard has been made. And just to give a picture of what that standard is, our operators were sent into the heart of the nest, the bee's nest, if you will, right? The hornet's nest of terroristville, the neighborhood. We had over 1,000 armed terrorists. Over 1,000 armed terrorists ready to engage on any hostage rescue attempt by Israel. They had held the 4 hostages in different locations. So that was another part of the complexity, is that it has to be done right and in unison and synergy in order for this to succeed. And then as they're rescuing these hostages, they engaged, like I said, with over 1,000 armed terrorists. The hostage rescue team, the one that's with the hostages, them alone took out 50 terrorists in order to get out without the hostages getting hurt. So 50 terrorists in the first, contact close to the hostage rescue team. And then collectively, they ended up eliminating over 250 armed terrorists. Wow. What is the world opinion? What did the world say? Was there awe, shock, admiration? No. Here in Norway, you reported it as a tragedy. The United States reported it as a tragedy, that the cost for Israeli hostages to be rescued, that Israel is willing to pay, is the murdering and the killing of over 250 Palestinians. That's what the world reported. They didn't say that they were armed. They didn't explain the complexity. None of that. Now you can say, well, Doron, where do you get this information? Like, how do you know? Like what that's your information versus our information. Well, how you interpret the data. I get it from the first hand. What I just told you about the operation, minus the secret things I'm not allowed to discuss, as to like you point out, yes, it was an extremely complex mission, and I have some idea of what the techniques and.
Were you part of it, the operation?
No. What I was is having a very close relationship to the Yamam unit. That many of those operators are very good friends of myself and my fellow teammates. And our unit, my reserve unit, actually has a very, very good relationship with the Yamam unit and a lot of the former operators and the current operators. And one of the operators that took part in that actually sat down with us and came and visited us on our base. And so what I'm saying is, not to brag, but it's important that people understand that this is firsthand information. These are people I know. So it's not something I read in the news. It's not something I might be familiar with. And we have been very close in vicinity to the two hostage rescue missions actually that took part of that had been taken, and so we're very familiar with how these things are taking place, even though neither myself or my teammates were directly involved with these missions. We are in that battle space. We're you know what I'm saying? We're exposed to a lot of how the military is operating and what they're doing, including being actually in my community where I live. We actually even know the family of the operator the only operator that died on that mission.
What was his name?
Arnon. I forget the full name now.
I remember Arnon. Yeah.
Yeah. And so and just to be able to hear from his family, to meet with them and to talk to them and to hear their, hear them memorializing this amazing hero. Because again, it's like, we always kind of joke about in our community, it's like, well, only when you die, you're this amazing guy. But it's like, no, really, this guy, well, for example, he had, before the operation, he actually had discussed with one of the main guys who took part in the Entebbe raid, one of the Matkalistim. And he spoke with this gentleman and basically was discussing just like, like life and like all these very like deep conversations, you know what I mean? About morality, about nation, about sacrifice, just having a warrior to warrior talk. And actually this man, the reason why I know that, it's because he publicized that conversation on his social media, basically saying, this is the caliber of this young man that I had the privilege of having this deep talks with. And he gave some of the things they discussed. And it really, people need to understand that these are people that are putting everything aside. They're training to the highest rigorous training to be able to perform on the highest levels, all because we don't have this desire to kill anybody. We don't have this desire to commit a genocide towards anybody. Even after October 7th, our desire is not to get back or to get even. And I guarantee you, we have had plenty of opportunity to do this. We are professionals. And we are patriots who love our country. That is the caliber of the people in the community that I'm connected with, myself included. This is what motivates me. What motivates me to do what I do is the love for my country, the love for my land, and the desire to defend it, because I have that makeup of a warrior. You know, it's not for everybody. And I'm very proud of those who go into high tech and go into Torah studies if they're of the religious community. To me, this is the makeup of our society, and I'm very proud of each person that puts their contribution into the whole. But this is our contribution for those of us who can defend. That's what we do. And we don't do it because we have to. We don't do it because, you know, we're looking for bad causes. We're doing it because of an altruistic love for our country, love for our land, and the willingness to pay the ultimate sacrifice to defend that. That's what motivates us every day. And the caliber of these people that I've had the honor to know and to fight, including one of the individuals that really impacted me from the war, his story. I actually never got to meet him, and I'm very angry with myself for not doing that, because I remember his brother, who is my good friend and teammate. He's one of my best friends in the team. Many times we were discussing about, hey, we need to get together, we need to meet and all this, and it just never happened. His brother was a platoon commander in a reserve unit for the Givati battalion. And during the war, well, first of all, he worked in his background in the civilian world was working in security, and he worked for the basically worked for our secret undercover airport security guys. So it's very, very highly trained people in the security world. And he literally left everything in order to, like, so he was actually working that day at the airport, and he left everything and told, you know, he didn't just like leave, like, you know, like, see you, bye. But he's saying, I got to go. And they said, okay, we got you. You know, we'll fill in the gap. So he went, and from that very first day, put in 100% into joining with his unit, getting his soldiers, and starting to be part of the armed, the armed resistance to these terrorist attacks on October 7th, like to go oppose them, to go and search houses. And he actually survived miraculously in Kisufim. So that's actually the one of the communities he helped clear, house to house to house. And one of the homes had been infiltrated by a terrorist, and they locked themselves in. And it was because of his persistence that he saw that something was out of the ordinary in this building, in this house, because they had a certain norm and whatever. And he noticed that this was out of the ordinary. It piqued his curiosity, even though the people there, the military there, and the local security force, they thought that house had already been cleared. So in their minds, no. And he was like, and so he was the one that actually pushed and was like, no, I really, and so he demanded that we clear this home and make sure it is clear. And because of that, they discovered the terrorist, ended up in a horrible gun battle with this guy who ended up throwing grenades at them and stuff. And in that whole close quarter combat, he almost died. He actually had a miracle where the grenade blew up in front of him, and he went flying out of the room through the door that was behind him on his back. And then the terrorists then ended up advancing, but I guess he was out of ammunition or something. So all he had besides the grenade was a knife. So he came to finish the job. And then both he and the other soldier ended up finishing the terrorists who came out to while trying to get your bearings from the explosion of a grenade. And it was like a total miracle that he wasn't, like, afterwards he checked himself, no shrapnel or anything.
Wow.
And exactly. I mean, it was just crazy. It was just crazy. And it's like, so all this stuff that this guy survived, and then later leading his unit into Gaza and doing the Gaza operations after the first 2 weeks where the government was trying to formulate ground operations and were being held back by the US and other countries saying, no, you shouldn't go in, blah, blah, blah. You need to show equal measures, crap. And so he goes into Gaza, he does his operations, and that's where he ended up meeting his fate. And so these are the people that motivated me to start my podcast, actually.
Yeah. What's it called, your podcast?
Just the Doron Keidar podcast. It's my name. And but
where can people find it? On Spotify and everywhere?
Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcast is where the episodes end up being aired. And but if you read the description, that's who I'm memorializing and saying this is who motivated me. It's these characters, because I want to give them the honor, because he had a tattoo that said "Facta non verba." Facta non verba meaning actions, not words. And this was from one of the Roman legions that had this motto for the legion. Yeah. And he took that motto, and that's what he lived his life by.
Yes.
It's that you take actions, we don't talk. And this is a man who overcame fear. Okay? Like you think like what? We're afraid. And he shares this in what he wrote in the, I don't know what you call it, like your journal, because he was journaling during the war. And so he, for example, talks about going into that house and having to overcome fear, going into Gaza, having to overcome fear of death, that I could die. But it's like this guy overcame those fears. He conquered his fear. He was a hero. He led his men, and he died a hero. And ended up dying in an ambush, actually, that they made a booby trap in one of the areas that they went to clear. And then, of course, unfortunately, they came under an ambush that ended up killing him and some other men from his unit. And then that was a big blow for us, of course, for my whole team, because here one of your best friends now has just lost his brother. And now it's hitting really close to home, which had already done by then already anyways. Most of us all know someone who died in the Nova, who was murdered, raped, tortured, brutally killed in the most horrific ways. Yes. But then we all have brothers in arms that have fallen, men that we have fought with, men that we have served with during this war. And, to in between your operations, to go up and go to a funeral of one of your best friends, and then to go back that same night and then go back to operations, that was very difficult for all of us. Probably, to me, the lowest end of the whole war, actually. It was super heavy and hard, super difficult. But that's what this is the humanity behind the men that are doing this fighting. We're not demons. We're not genocidal maniacs, like we're being called. Yeah. We are warriors who are literally standing and holding the line between freedom and terrorism. A nation, a country, a region that would be controlled by terrorists had the IDF not been established, had the special units not been pushed to our utmost limit to do the impossible. And instead of being recognized for that, we get criticized for that. We get demonized for that by here in Norway, United States, Canada, United Kingdom. And my question is, why? What is wrong with you people? And the few things that I can figure is that it's this humanistic worldview, that we're all the same. Yeah. We're all the same. We all have the same values. And that the reason why the Palestinians are doing what they did on October 7th is because of a reaction to what has to be the most horrific atrocities by Israel. That has to, that's the conclusion I believe that they have convinced themselves of. And I'm like, no, you really don't understand the Middle East. You really don't understand what these guys' agenda is. Before Israel existed, before all that, they had a globalist agenda. And if they're not killing you in the West, if it's Christianity or whatever, and Western values, they end up killing each other.
Yeah.
Look at the Arab Spring. Well, okay, so if everybody there have the same morals as you do here in the West, and so on, then why were they killing each other? There was no occupying force occupying them, as they're calling us occupiers. So what was the factor there? How do you guys live with your worldview? Like, how do you live with that? How do you it does, because it doesn't add up. If you ask the right questions.
Yeah, I've been trying to think about that a lot too, because it's so astounding to me that people can't see this, because I think it's a little bit about people are too comfortable in our world nowadays. People are too comfortable. It's not like earlier times in our history where war and evil was part of our everyday, where we had to defend ourselves. People are so comfortable sitting with their Cheetos, chips, and like it's they don't have to relate and see good and evil every day, so they don't know it exists. It's like they're not able to see the dimensions that you guys see on the battlefield. They're not able to see that evil actually exists, that is something that is a part of the human nature. And without seeing that, then they're missing that dimension, I think. They're seeing like a one-dimensional representation of what is actually a three-dimensional field, and they're seeing it, they're trying to fit it into this narrative that they've decided to have. Like, it has to be that somebody's the oppressor and somebody's oppressed. That's the only way this works. So trying to fit that in, then the Palestinians have to be the oppressed and Israel has to be the oppressor, and that's the only way it works. And they're forgetting the whole thing about, well, would you stop to consider that maybe good and evil actually exists in the world?
Exactly. And I think a beautiful portrayal of that, it's not beautiful, but what I mean is that it really hits home and was captured in a very, very realistic and this is literally why these people are doing why people like me are doing what we're doing, why we're warriors, why we're defenders, is because we recognize that. We didn't recognize it off the bat. Okay. I wasn't aware. All I knew is that there's very bad evil in the world, and that I'm going to do everything in my ability to fight against it, and I'm willing to do so. And then you discover throughout many years of fighting, you start to realize, because we see it firsthand, what this evil is capable of. And so one of the best portrayals of that evil was in the, I think it's called American Sniper, that Clint Eastwood had directed and produced. And that is portraying the life story of Chris Kyle, which is a legendary and controversial Navy SEAL. But any case, this is telling the story of the collective whole of people like Chris Kyle, who served in the most elite units to be able to fight that evil, because they had enough of watching the devourers, the evil of society, or within our society, or external and coming to destroy our society. They saw those wolves. They recognized them for what they were. And when he went, and he tells in his book, because I've also read the book actually, which is a really good read, by the way. And he describes what these men were doing and trying to explain it to his fellow Americans, who started to question the war that the U.S. was fighting against terrorism, because of, again, public opinion and the media twisting things. And he's like, it's actually black and white. It is pure evil against pure justice here. And in the film, they depict one of these thugs that they were up against. I think the butcher of Ramadi, whatever the name, the nickname of this bad dude, and his MO was to take a drill.
Yeah, I remember that.
And to use it to torture his victims with, before he actually killed them by drilling into their skulls.
Yeah.
And you see this scene where where the Iraqi family gets captured because the terrorists found out that they were helping give information to this butcher, and he grabs a hold of one of the boys and then starts to do this. Yeah. And you see the character that's playing Chris Kyle in the film. He's trying to intervene. He's trying to help, but he can't because he's held down by heavy fire, and I think even one of his guys gets hurt or whatever. But the point is, what I ask myself as an audience in the West, when you watch that, and if you watch that, do you really think this is a fake portrayal? Do you think that Clint Eastwood was trying to make it a juicy story? No, he's actually giving you a censored version of these butchers. If I could tell your audience and discuss what we've seen and what they're capable of, that's weak sauce. That is a drop in the bucket of what these guys have in their soul, which they don't have a soul, is what I've discovered. They are cold-blooded killers. Yeah. You have the closest thing in the West is you have serial killers. Yeah. These guys fit that profile. The only difference is they're not labeled as psychopaths. And
also, I just want to add that the leftists and the whole like modern narrative that people have, especially on the left, but also in mainstream media, that these are just like freedom fighters and they're just oppressed people. Yeah. Then how do you explain that part with the torture and the sadistic methods of killing? Like up until like soldier to soldier killing one another in legitimate battles, like that they could probably explain with their narratives, but they can't explain that part with like torturing children. Like how do you explain that in your narrative? You can't, because there's no justification for that. There's no reason for that. There's no reason for that except just the pure pleasure of sadistic evil. There's no other reasoning.
I will give you one story that is, again, a firsthand account. So, like I said, we have many good friends from the different special forces community, and a lot of them took the hardest blow during this attack. The first time in the history of our Tier 1 operators they had lost such high numbers in one day. So that was a huge blow for that community in specific. And one of those operators told me they had retrieved the body cam from one of the terrorists they had eliminated. And the guy he couldn't believe what he was watching, because they were reviewing the body cam to see what were these guys up to. Because they documented what they did, not all of them, but many of them. Again, to give you an idea what my defenders were up against, we had up to 6,000, estimate of 6,000 terrorists that had crossed in that day. Mm-hmm. We originally said 3,000, but the new information now is actually saying, no, it was more closer to 6,000. And it's like, okay. And it makes a lot of sense to me too, because of all the stories I've heard from the different guys and how many they ended up being able to stop and to kill in combat. And so out of that huge number, many of them, imagine, are equipped with body cams to document this evil, because that's part of the psychological warfare that they're doing against us, because they know we have a conscience, we have morals, it's going to affect us to see what they did to us, what they're used to. They're doing it to themselves all the time, let alone to what they perceive the enemy. And so he tells the story of, as he's looking and interviewing over this footage, he said, you won't believe what these guys did. I mean, this is just one family, one story, multiplied over 1,000. A couple at home who have a baby. They're being tortured to death. They're being tied to each other, forearm to forearm, so they can't get away from their loved one, their spouse that they're deeply in love with, and have a baby. And they're trying to get away. Meanwhile, the terrorists are torturing the husband, torturing the wife, cutting off her breasts, gouging out one of his eyes. And before they finish, and they took their time. And what I'm telling you isn't like, boom, boom, they're done. They took their time, I'm telling you. So they had to endure this for hours. Then finally, as they were done with their long drawn torture, because this was part of their orders, by the way, to rape and to do as much as you can. And they went and got the baby, and they put the baby into the oven and burnt their baby alive for them to see as their last breath on this earth before they killed him. And I was like, wow. And yet the world claims that what I'm doing is a genocide. And now the news is telling you that the babies that were beheaded is fairy tale and a lie, and that Israel has fabricated that the Jewish women that were raped, and they're not just Jews that were raped, by the way, they were Muslim women held captive as well, by the way. So we had Bedouin Muslims, we had Christian Arabs, you had Druze, you had nationals, foreign nationals that had come to party at the Nova. So you had people from different countries, foreign nationals. Everyone were treated the same, with the same brutality, but the motive was to kill as many Jews. That was the main underlying motive of the terrorists, but they didn't differentiate. And they didn't care that you were a Bedouin Muslim speaking their language and pleading with them not to kill you. And all they wanted to know is, where are the Jews? Tell us, where are the Jews? As they're beating these guys to death. And then we ended up where they were also captured. And one of the last hostages that have been rescued, because that's what they say, released. Mm-hmm. But one of the hostages, one of the last hostages was rescued over 300 days in captivity. He was found in one of the terror tunnels and brought back to Israel. And this is a Bedouin Muslim Arab, and they didn't care. And he also tells about how he saw his fellow Jewish captors being treated horribly and so on, and then also died in captivity. And so he was able to also give us some information of who is actually not alive anymore. And now that family can at least know and have closure. Mm. But of course, they want the body back.
A lot of this footage, have you seen it yourself? The footage that you described?
I haven't seen it myself. I mean, I saw some, but to be honest, after October 7th, 8th, give or take, like the first few days, I stopped looking at the footage. I refused to watch it because I wanted to guard my heart from that darkness so that I could operate with a level head. Yes. Because I knew in one point, my good friend that I told you about, whose brother ended up dying in combat, I'll never forget. He came to me one day because we were looking and like in shock, and one day he and this was after I decided I'm not looking at it anymore. I can't. I can't. This is too much for me. He said, "Could you believe me?" He showed me this Jewish kid that was being abused in Gaza. It just broke me. I broke down in tears. I said, "Man, you got to stop that." And he understood. And the rest of the guys understood, like, yeah, we need to hold back. We need to stop reviewing this stuff, quit torturing ourselves. And not just that, but guard yourself as a professional, like I said, so that you can say that without a shadow of a doubt, you're not going to execute vengeance against your enemy. You're going to execute justice, and there's a difference. There's going to be a just response to this evil, and the government of Israel is the one that is deciding how that's going to be done and conducted. And there's the Ruach Tzal, which people need to learn, which is roughly translated the spirit of the IDF, which is our 10 commandments.
What are those?
So there's 10 guiding principles for every soldier that goes through the IDF, that these are our 10 guiding principles of you respect your, for example, like the weapon, Toar HaNeshek it's called. So that the weapon is not to be used to exercise violence towards your enemy. You don't use it to exercise your will, meaning you go over here, you do this, you know, I have a gun at you, you know, it's that you use it when you need to. There's an armed opponent. Okay, engage. Unarmed, disengage. And that, in other words, the idea is that when you find yourself in a civilian population, they understand you're not there to exercise violence towards them, but that violence is directed towards the armed terrorists. So it's a bunch of stuff like that. It's about patriotism, if you will, meaning you never leave a man behind.
Yes. Similar to the U.S. code of conduct, like for the military.
Yes, it's similar, but but the U.S. in the Army and the Navy and all, they each have a different. I see. They have if I understand correctly, they kind of have
so different. This is universal for the whole of IDF and all of the units and everyone.
Yeah, like if you're in SF in the U.S., then there's the Green Berets have like kind of their own motto, if you will, of what we are all about. But what I'm saying is this is universal for anyone in the IDF. Everyone gets this. Yeah. Everyone is taught this before you even get your weapon. And the idea is before we arm you, you need to understand what are the guiding principles of our military. And those, by the way, are founded on the Jewish ethics. Yeah, definitely. And that's another important thing. So why is this important? When you criticize the IDF, you're essentially criticizing Jewish ethics and saying that Jewish ethics is not righteous, but your humanism is supreme above this. I have no problem with you being a humanist, being a socialist, being a Marxist, being a communist. That's your free will to choose those ideals. But to say that my ideals somehow are faulty and wrong, and actually criminal, because that's how you paint us out to be, then you need to recognize what you're doing is you are literally criticizing the Jewish ethics of the Jewish people. And that is, to me, important for people to understand that. And I know that rarely is this ever talked about or debated in this whole, like you said, because you have these justice warriors, so-called, they're just freedom fighters. They're not freedom fighters, they are terrorists. And when you claim and repeat here from the river to the sea, you are terrorist sympathizers, and you are supporting the cause of Judenrein in the land of Israel, that there will be no Jews, because from the rivers, from the Jordan, which is neighboring our neighboring nation, Jordan and Syria, and then on the other side, the sea is the Mediterranean. So free, what does that mean? From the river to the sea, that's all the land of Israel. Yeah. So free from what? They never say.
From Jews.
Yeah, but I can tell you because I have seen the propaganda in Gaza. I've seen it in all of the Palestinian-controlled areas where they teach the kids and so on. They breed them to hate. Yes. They breed them to believe that there are going to be no Jews in Israel, period. Whereas in the Israeli schools, they teach about how we respect our neighbor, how we honor, and that they have equal rights, and how can we discuss a two-state solution, and how can we, and compromise? What are we willing to give up? What are we, for peace?
And what is so terrible also
Two different worlds.
is that a lot of the people who were killed in the kibbutz
Yeah.
were like the most peace-loving people who actually wanted
Yes.
peace with the Palestinians, and like
Yes.
they didn't care. They killed them just as sadistically as everybody else.
Exactly. Be'eri is the community that you're talking about, is the main community that represented the shining light of we're here for you. The community, the Jewish people that lived in that community promoted all kinds of programs of how can we help Palestinians get to our hospitals and get better care? How can we help them in social ways, and promoting their rights and trying to fight for their rights? Exactly. And they were the first line because they're one of the closest Jewish communities to the Gaza fence, and they were one of the first ones to just get and the worst atrocities happened, and the most people per capita of that community were just slaughtered, murdered in the most horrible ways. And I have seen that community hundreds of times now. It feels like as each time my unit would go into Gaza to carry out another operation, it was like this eerie reminder of what you're going in to do. Mm-hmm. You know, like it's not like that happened October 7th. That was something. No. October 7th was a daily reminder for us, because we would see the burnt homes. Yeah. We would see the what do you call it? The carnage that the terrorists had left, because that community is a ghost town. You know, people have not come back to live there. Very few have returned. The majority are just like, no. It is, and it's still an active, in a way, almost an active battle zone, because a lot of the military operates within that area as this war has been progressing now for many months. And so, it's like this eerie reminder. Every mission, not every, but many missions we would drive by, happen to have, our route would take us through there, and you just see that, and you're like, man, this is what it's all about, And
for you personally, like seeing all of this darkness and this evil, how do you protect yourself from being, I don't know which word to use, from letting that evil kind of sip in, or how, just like, you wear a bulletproof vest to fend off the bullets. How do you protect yourself from the evil, the darkness of this?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it's very important to have some way to do that. And I personally believe that within my own strength, I'm not capable of doing that. I don't have it within me and my own humanistic, my own worldview to protect me from that. I need something of a higher power. So for me, it's my faith in God. It's reading the Bible, reading truth, reading about how God views humanity, how he views evil, how he unfolds for us what real evil is, and that it's going to exist in this world, and that you need to be guarding yourself from that and choose the way of light and the way of life, and that there is a way to do that. And King David and the Psalms, right? I mean, this was the ultimate warrior in Jewish history. And, you just read of his conflict as this warrior who's fighting evil. That gives you perspective. It gives you grounding. And it's the prayers, you're connected in that, or protected, I would say, within the Jewish faith, within the Jewish people, within understanding that this is, we are an eternal people, and we are a people of God, and that we're better than this, right? Not that it's not in a I'm better than everyone else attitude, but this that I'm better in this because God has shown us through his word, through the Torah that he gave us at Sinai, that there is a higher calling, if you will, a higher standard that God has welcomed Israel to live by and to also be a light to the nations. And so that is a very heavy weight. Very many Jews are sick and tired of being God's chosen people. And people misinterpret that as that we're this kind of racist religion and that we're better than others. That's not what it means. It means that we have the potential to a higher standard and to share that higher standard with the world, which the West, most of the West, has embraced that through Christianity. They've embraced the Judeo-Christian values, and that the societies have been built off of those foundations, and that the laws were built off those foundations, and that's why these societies have flourished and been blessed. And what I'm seeing in Europe today and in North America and other countries is that there's a turn away from those healthy roots and saying we don't need God, we don't need religion is all bad, and I disagree. It depends what religion, it depends what it promotes. And I believe that what God has given Israel is the truth for the world, and that the more the world recognizes that truth and lives by that truth, you're going to be a healthier person, you're going to be a better contributor to society, and you can build a much more blessed society. But you're not going to be blessed, I believe, when you depend on yourself and think that there is no God, there is no higher power, and that I am God, and that I know what is better, because the truth of the reality is you don't.
I agree. And also that if people reject some kind of belief in a higher power or transcendent nature of our existence, then it's not like that whole part of you or a part of existence disappears. It leaves a vacuum for something else to come in and take that place, of which you're not aware.
Exactly. And it happens all the time.
Yeah. Like with woke, this culture, this cancel culture, it's like it takes the place of where religion used to be, where a belief in a higher power used to be.
Yes. It
And
gave
that's
you
even more
grounding.
dangerous.
It gave you grounding.
Yeah.
You know, it's like electricity, right? You know, electricity can kill you. It can create quite a lot of damage, but electricity can also benefit you.
Yeah.
You can power, light and, devices, what have you. And when properly channeled, it becomes a blessing to you.
Yes.
That is, to me, what God is for us. If you don't have God and you don't have a proper grounding, because you need, like in electricity, you need that grounding, then it can kill you. And this assumption that I'm better on my own and I can figure out my own destiny and what is right and whatever that route is, but with this rejection of what was already handed down to us, then that, I think, is where things get tricky. It gets dangerous, and it becomes self-inflicting. It becomes a self-inflicting wound. Is your pride and arrogance? Because to me, that is prideful and arrogant to think that you're smarter than your creator.
Yes.
Your creator created you, and he also, through divine intervention, passed down through the ages the manual for you to live by. And just like you follow that manual for your washing machine or whatever, your car, and you don't put what you feel, right? Because it's all about feelings a lot today, yeah? Oh, I feel that what I need to put in my car is this. Try that. Please, go by your feelings. Don't go by science and facts, and that's what God is. It is a scientific proven fact. I mean, this is truth, a scientific proven fact that we could not come out of nothing. There is a higher power. Based on everything that NASA and scientists have researched, they have come to the discovery this couldn't have come out of nothing. There's too much order. Yes. There's too much of a fine balance of just a little bit of degrees of this, of the sun and the moon and this, we're gone. Why is that, do you think? Oh, it's just because of a big bang and boom, we're here. and and evolution and boom, yet you can't prove scientifically evolution. You can't prove that we just came out of nothing. But but what you can prove is that there is life everywhere. There's blessing all around to be had, but it's within a certain way of channeling that balance, which God says, here's how you do it. He's given us that roadmap, and so many in our society today want to reject it and find their own way. It is to me, that is so destructive. It is so destructive, and but that's where I find my balance. That's where I find my grounding and my sanity and ability to have a hope, because I do have a hope that it's with light you're going to deflect darkness. Darkness, and the darker it gets in the world, the more the brightness of the light shines brighter.
Yeah.
So I don't mind, and I don't care what the world chooses around me. I'm going to stick to what I've learned and found in my life that has given me that grounding and that truth, and that truth does become brighter, and you are going to shine more.
And it's probably also that you have a conception of what evil is through religion, because I would imagine that a person who doesn't have a conception of what evil is and don't believe in evil, if they witness the things that you've witnessed, they will be completely destroyed by that, because it would be such a shock that all their lives they've just had this defense mechanism against that, and telling themselves that good and evil doesn't exist, everything is just rational, and then they witness something that is somehow almost out of this world if you don't believe that evil exists. And I think that protects you, probably, that you understand that is something that exists. And also through the Torah and the Bible for Christian people, it's also a protection, I think, to see that this has happened before.
Yes.
This is not the first time. This is not the first time that evil exists, that these sadistic killings exist. They happen all the time. Which leads me to my next question to you, 7th of October, what do you think that was about? What was it, if you try to conceptualize it? Was it anti-Semitism? Was it an attack against Israel, the Israeli people? Was it about land areas geographically? Was it about Iran? In your view, what was it?
Yeah. Well, what I would say that the October 7th manifestation of a very long, many years of propaganda and brainwashing and religious extremism of Islam. I have, by the way, many good Muslim friends, and I want to be careful when we discuss that, because I think there's a difference between Muslim believers, which is the majority of Muslims in the world do not believe in the jihadist worldview, and many of them are fighting that and trying to stop this phenomenon within their community.
And in the IDF, actually, we should point out that there are Muslims in the IDF fighting against this.
Exactly. There are Muslim soldiers serving with us. I've served with Muslim soldiers, specifically in the unit that I was in originally, in the Southern Command. And so I know them very well, and they have ethics and shared values like everyone else in the world. The problem are the jihadists, the extremists, who believe in a caliphate, a world dominance, where they are about taking over the world, and it's only their version of Islam as well that matters. So it starts with their plan to first take over the Western powers, the Western world, the Christian, or the Christians really is how they label it. And then they see that their fight is against Judaism, so Jews. So their worldview is first the Saturday people, then the Sunday people. And we're also in their backyard. So we're in their region. So we're an easier, quicker target to get rid of. And that's why in their minds, and their jihadist view is if we can topple the Jewish Zionist state that represents the Jewish people and the Jewish faith, we will then take over and go back to the caliphate of where we spread Islam to the world, and it got stopped here in Europe, in specifically in Spain. And so that is also why the first terrorist attacks that happened in the early 2000s was in Spain, when these terrorist groups like Al-Qaeda, and then later ISIS, and then later, all, but it's all from the same world dominance view that was founded by the Islamic Brotherhood. The Islamic Brotherhood was founded in Cairo, in Egypt, and they have a network and a plan of this jihadist worldview that they share to spread this evil, to spread it through violence and terror. And then you have another caliphate, which is Iran. They have they're not Arabs, first of all, so they don't share the same pan-Arabic view. They want to be the ones who lead the caliphate from the Persian empire worldview. And so that's their desire. And so that's why they'll actually even fund like Hamas and Hezbollah terrorist groups, even though they're not on the same religious playing field. They, the Sunni Shiite worldview. But so then you have them. Then you have Turkey, that is led by Erdogan now, who, since he got into power, a nation that used to be, nominal Muslim nation, who was basically secular Muslims, if you like, not holding any extremist views per se, and actually a friendly nation to Israel, where we had friendly relations. We had both business and commerce and tourism that we flooded Turkey with for many, many years. And then all that stopped when Erdogan got into power. He was the one that started to demonize Israel, to shun Israel, being part of NATO and part of this European kind of persona, but really you're being the black sheep. and what he ended up doing is actually creating a lot of breaking down of relations with Israel diplomatically and trade-wise and so on. And his desire is to revive what he sees as the caliphate that used to be the superpower of the Islamic world during the Turkish Empire, the Ottoman Empire. And so his desire is to go back to the golden age, where they had over 400-year reign around the region, but mainly they had Israel, as well as kind of like that central representation of their power, even though at the time when they were here for 400 years, when I say here in Israel for 400 years, they never did anything significant with that control. They didn't build the Al-Aqsa. They didn't beautify it and invest in the third holiest site in Islam. It was actually overgrown with weeds. Jerusalem was a backwater country. The only thing that they actually contributed to the land of Israel was clock towers that are built all throughout the country and still standing today as a historic imprint of that golden age. And that was towards the end of their reign in the 1800s. They built clock towers and railroad systems in order to connect their empire and to have more of a how to say trade and spreading of their control of the region and connecting it through the rail systems. And that's why they had clock towers in a region that time was irrelevant. Not the Middle Easterners are not like traditionally not like the Europeans, where they it's all about timing and I have to be somewhere, and to them time is relative to the sun and so on. That's how they would tell time. So really they built a bunch of useless clock towers that nobody at least of the local population, like, okay, so what's this for? Well, because there's a train, and the train is going to leave. When you see this dial and this dial reach this, that means the train's going to go. So, you know what I mean? That was their only contribution to progress, right? And that is it. Some mosques, but other than that, there wasn't anything very significant during that period. And yet still, the only reason why they want to, as if in this fantasy mindset that they have, it's a fantasy view of like, go back to what? Go back to how you didn't care about Israel, how you didn't cultivate the land, you didn't build industry like the Jews did in the 1800s. We were the ones who came and revived the land.
It was a desert.
Mark Twain is a modern day prophet. I mean, the guy was an atheist and mocked religion. And actually, I believe, thanks to that view that he had, he was mocking the Christians that he knew in where he lived in America of, oh, Jerusalem, the gold, it's a backwater town, weeds overgrown. Like he was railing on how much of an armpit of the Middle East the land of Palestine was under the Ottoman period. And to me, it's like the guy's a prophet, It's like without even knowing it, because thanks to your very accurate testimony and not painted with or tainted with a Christian or Jewish or Islamic religious view where you're not going to be too brutally honest, but literally pointing out all the bad. By doing that, he actually showed like this is what the Ottoman Empire contributed, which was what? And so what exactly do they want to restore? They talk of, and both Iran and Turkey, actually, their main focal point is Jerusalem. They want to Islamize the old city in specific. And this is something that nobody talks about here in Europe. Turkey has a care package that they pay incentive and give and incentivize the Muslims of the old city not to sell any property to Jews.
Really?
Yeah, or Christians or anybody, only Muslims. And so these Muslims who live in the old city, who for whatever reason are wanting to sell their real estate because they, maybe they want to leave or whatever, they're now being incentivized and given financial, and we're talking about millions, to prevent them from doing this, you see. And this is active, you understand? This is an active control of the status quo on the ground by Turkey, who is coming from the outside. And so, and then sending in a bunch of Turkish delegates and to promote, again, an Islamic extremist worldview into the old city to demonize their view of the local Muslims who live here in peace and equality and share the same rights as I do. And in fact, they get more rights than I do, by the way, as minorities.
No, because Jews aren't allowed up there to pray also at the
on
mosque.
the Al-Aqsa, on the Temple Mount, which they call the Al-Aqsa.
Yeah.
You're supposedly not allowed to pray.
And you can't have any, like, you can't walk there with the Star of David,
Correct.
nothing.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. So it's very extreme regulation to appease the Muslim population of the old city and the rest of Israel, actually, because Muslims come from all over to come and pray at the Al-Aqsa, not just the ones who live in Jerusalem. But the thing is, it's like, you're prohibiting the rights, the religious rights, which, by the way, this is part of the rules of the land. And according to the international law that Israel agreed post 1967, that we are to uphold the religious rights of all the religious views in the land of Israel. And you have that being exercised, for example, in Hebron, where Jews and Muslims share the visiting rights and the religious practice of high holy days and so on of the patriarch's tomb in Hebron, which the Muslims have built a mosque there. And so Jews can visit at certain times and seasons, and the Muslims and so on, and they share this very important site that we both share. But the Temple Mount is the only place where that is not being exercised and it's not being regulated. Instead, we appease the Muslim population, and it's like they get full rights. And then the Jews have visiting rights about 5 days a week, 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours in the afternoon, and that's it. Mm-hmm. And it's with a convoy of police that protect you and that escort you. And like you pointed out, it is also, you go through, and they're the only ones, visitors, and it's not just Jews, but tourists can visit during those same hours. But Jews, of course, will they take advantage of the visiting hours for all. And there's only one entry point where you have to go through a security check, and they make sure you don't have a Bible as a Christian, not a Christian Bible, not a Jewish prayer book, or anything religious.
No cross, no Star of David.
No cross,
nothing.
No Star of David.
Because what can happen if you do have that? Are they afraid that there will be an attack, or what is it?
Yes, yes. So it's not because Israel is exercising religious discrimination. Yeah. It's actually because the Islamic Waqf is exercising religious discrimination, and using the Israeli police to enforce that. Mm-hmm. And so the fear, if you will, it's not really the fear, but the concern is that there will be violent blowback from the Muslims who are up there during those hours, because it's not like Muslims aren't up there during these visiting hours. Yeah. They have visiting hours 24/7 is the reality. And they have 9 other, and I say they, meaning the Muslims have 9 other entry points up to the Temple Mount. They don't go through a security screening for weapons or anything. Wow. They have full access. The only thing they need to prove is that they're Muslim, and you have Israeli police standing at those entry points to prevent you and me, the non-Muslim, from going in. So they'll ask you, you a Muslim? No. Well, there's one entry point. You need to go to that one. Uh-huh. Oh, and by the way, now's not the time. The next time will be tomorrow morning, or in the afternoon. In another hour or whatever, and that's it.
Are many
so
people
it's protecting it. We protect the Temple Mount for Muslims to have free access, and no security screening.
Isn't that incredibly dangerous?
It is, and that's why we've had terrorist attacks on the Temple Mount. Why terrorists have smuggled weapons and knives and guns and have attacked the Israeli police.
Why do you keep doing that? Like, are the government in Israel so afraid that they would upset the situation if they were like to enforce, like, from now on we have to have security checks on all Muslims as well?
Yeah. We did that once. Yeah. For a very short time, and we stopped it immediately. Mm-hmm. I think it was less than 24 hours, and we took down the security machines, right? The metal detectors.
Yeah, because what happened?
There was public outbreak, or there was outcry. By Jordan. Yeah. Who is the custodian of the Temple Mount through their Waqf, which is part of the agreement that Israel created after 67. So they always give a pushback. Turkey gives a pushback, like I pointed out, and other nations, and then of course Western nations follow suit with, like I said, this Islamic discrimination towards the other, and the promotion of Islamic discrimination on the Temple Mount, and pressure put on Israel. So what your nations are doing is you're actually promoting discrimination and allowing the extremists to always have their way. Yeah. And that's a problem.
Enabling.
Thank you. That's a perfect exactly. You're making Israel be the enablers. Yeah. Because we're the ones who have to be because of the setup, we're the ones who are responsible for the security and safety of this area, because we recognize if there's not at least at the bare minimum, that we at least have a police presence in that area with riot police and everything, then it would be absolute chaos otherwise. Because what happens, a lot of the preaching and the like I said, this Islamic extremism comes mainly from Turkey. They are the ones who push the script of what is being read on the Temple Mount at the Al-Aqsa Mosque, preaching, Kabir Kabir al-Yahud, Allah is going to give us victory over the Yahud, over the Jew, and da-da-da. This is being preached while being protected by al-Yahud.
That's super ironic.
Super ironic. And that's the reality. And it is absolute insanity. So that is actually
God. But it also is a testament to how much of a democracy Israel is.
Exactly.
Like allowing that. Like,
exactly.
You're preaching death to us, but we're protecting you because of free speech.
Yes. Yeah. So that's actually why I even started back in 2014. I started a nonprofit to expose that reality and to actually lead a true freedom, religious freedom war, if you will, not war as in war, but meaning to combat against this. Yeah. I started this years ago to promote freedom of religious freedoms and the freedoms to pray and worship on the Temple Mount for all.
Yeah.
This is what I've been campaigning and trying to promote through social media and education on this topic, but then also through trying to change legislation in Israel through the Supreme Court, through the Israeli law, and so on, and to basically address this issue, because I see this as a security professional. I see this as a security threat. If you keep promoting discrimination, it leads to extremism.
Yeah.
And extremism leads to terrorist attacks. And if you do a study, and there's been a study on this, but if you read the study, you will see that every terrorist since the mid-90s up till today, every terrorist attack in Jerusalem, in Israel, was motivated by Al-Aqsa, by that we are going to liberate Al-Aqsa. Because they are being propagated to believe that Al-Aqsa is not free, ironically.
Right.
And it's like, really? That's how blind they are. Even though the reality on the ground is that they have full freedoms on the Temple Mount, except for security. Yeah? In their minds, because Israel has a security presence, then somehow Al-Aqsa isn't free.
I see.
And the security presence is actually to prevent non-Muslims from going to the Temple Mount. And that's why it's there. And to prevent Islamic rioting, extremists who riot up on the Temple Mount. But when you speak to the Muslims themselves, again, to not demonize so people don't get this skewed view, the majority of Muslims are the ones who are telling us, the older men who go up there to pray, are saying, we are sick and tired of these young, easily influenced maniacs taking over this holy space that I'm coming here to pray in peace, and they're turning it into a terrorist headquarters.
Yes.
And rioting. We're sick of this. So that's their protest that nobody hears.
But within Israel, are people scared of there being Muslim sleeper cells, like suddenly like living a life I'm just a liberal Muslim, but in reality being like a sleeper cell which could be activated? Yeah, of course. I mean, we're not just that we're concerned about that, we know that exists is the reality. Because our security forces, our intelligence community and our special forces community that, like the Faudas we were talking about, those guys have they're on the heartbeat or the pulse of being the ones who need to be aware of those potentials. And they're very much aware of it. They're searching and trying to zero in on those potential threats, because we know they exist. We know that they have made attempts, and we also know that they have been stopped many times.
But then, unfortunately, with these lone wolf attacks, as known as the knife Antifada a few years ago, and unfortunately still a very popular fad for these lone wolf attackers, that they recognize that I don't need to work for a terrorist group. I don't need to be a part of any affiliation of any kind. I've been brainwashed enough to believe that I can take action. I can and so they're so motivated by hatred and fueled by this hatred and this, I need to do something. I can do something. And I see that it's as simple as just taking a kitchen knife, and that's what they do. They go arm themselves with something as simple as a knife, and go and start going on a killing spree. And those are very hard to identify because they're non-terrorist related. But what it is proof of, if anything, it's proof of what we're discussing here, that these people have been programmed. They have been groomed to become so extreme that this is the fruit of that. So it's either those who join full-blown into terrorism and or take the law in their own hands, so to speak, and go and carry out a very horrible attack.
What would you say is the security situation now, like in, for example, Jerusalem? Is it safe to travel there, like as a foreigner, as a tourist? Because I might be going actually to Jerusalem in November for a Jewish Media Summit conference. Would you say like it's safe to travel there? Should one be cautious to travel there?
Yeah. I would say that people don't need to be cautious. They don't need to be worried. Because the reality on the ground is, like I said, the majority of the Muslims in Jerusalem and in the world in general don't share these extremist views. Mm-hmm. And so Jerusalem, even though we have 30% Muslim Arab population, over 30%, they are peaceful Muslims. They are part of Israeli society. They are wanting to just work and make a living, put food on the table, shelter over their home, and all that. And what Israel has been successful in doing, like I pointed out, is in zero in and targeting on the extremists and the ones who are making life hell for both the Arab Muslim community where they live within, because the violence doesn't just spill out on Jewish population, but it's gang mob style violence within their own community, and it gets very, very violent, unfortunately. And I've been actually involved with some of these operations myself in East Jerusalem, so I've seen it firsthand, and I can tell you that we are trying to very hard, like working very much around the clock, the security and intelligence community, to really weed out the troublemakers and the potential terrorists, so that the environment of Jerusalem, when you come as a tourist or you as a local resident, you feel safe, you feel secure. And that's the reality right now as we're speaking. As war is ongoing right now in Gaza, in the West Bank, in the north, with Hezbollah. Ironically, Jerusalem is one of the safest places right now in Israel.
Oh my God.
The atmosphere is peaceful. You have tourists, not as many as we had before the war at all. So tourism has gone down, way down, because they look at the war aspect. Yeah. But it really is a bubble within all of this conflict that has very, very relative peace. And you'll experience that if you come in November. Yeah. You'll see firsthand that actually, as a security professional, I can tell you, Jerusalem is going to be one of your safest cities to visit, including Tel Aviv and Central Israel and all of that.
Because I want to touch on that. We're going in for a landing soon. We've been speaking 2 hours already, but it's so interesting. We could probably talk for like 10 hours. But I also want to touch on, fast forward to right now, where Israel is being, it seems like, from my perspective, being bombarded from everywhere, like from Hezbollah, Lebanon in the north, and Syria and Iran is probably on the stairs, and
Yep. The Houthis.
Everywhere. How is Israel able to cope with all of these fronts and fighting on all these different fronts at the same time?
So I will quote the ancient wisdom of the fiddler on the roof. It's a balancing act. It's a balancing act of literally being a fiddler on the roof, so to speak. The wisdom of Tevye. But it really is a balancing act because it is overwhelming. It is a lot to handle and a lot to confront. If being on the armed or technological response to this, to these threats, you're aware of the threats. You're aware of the overwhelming forces that are uniting and trying to destroy us. And I would say that we're handling it pretty well. But I also believe that I really believe in miracles. And I've seen a lot of miracles in Gaza, heard from, not personally, but heard, but also witnessed myself as well. And I can tell you that without God, again, to bring this back in, without God, we wouldn't be able to make it. I mean, He has really helped us in some very crazy ways that you can't explain it other than, wow, that was a miracle. Like, that shouldn't have turned out that way, and it did. And I mean, for example, the Iranian airstrike, ballistic missiles that were fired, I think it was over 300 rockets or so.
In March or April, or was it?
Yeah. Mm. And I happened to be in my home, actually on break from fighting, and I got to witness this, like it was like Star Wars over your head, just like from all over. It's like, what in the world are we witnessing here? And very surreal, but according to the experts, was a ballistic rocket people in that field of defense, they said that the percentage of the rockets that were sent towards Israel that were taken down was impossible. It was like over 90%. They said that those are not realistic numbers. That shouldn't be, according to physics, science, and aerospace technology. And they're like, that shouldn't have happened. And so all that to say that we do have our capabilities. We're not like a bunch of religious fanatics saying, some angel in the sky is going to help me. But it's like Israel is doing everything we can within our capability and whatever wisdom that we've been given in technology or conducting ourselves in combat and strategy. But we do reach and have reached our limitations, humanly speaking, in a human capability and technologically. Yet we are getting miracles. Right? We're seeing miracles. And I think that's what Israel is kind of in the middle of. In a way, I see it as God trying to get our attention and say, hey, I'm with you, and quit giving into the new fads of today, the humanism, these negotiations, those negotiations,
relativism,
whatever's the new fad of the now, and the new whoever's got a great idea. Like, God's like, hey, I gave you my word, I gave you my promise, I told you that this is a land that I'm giving you, I'm inheriting you, and that you're going to be blessed in it, and that you're going to be a blessing to many nations. And I believe that there is going to be a day where also, to me, the big miracle is where these nations that have hated us, because I know there is a prophecy, I forget exactly which book, where it says that there's going to be a highway between Egypt and like up into Lebanon or something, like this highway of where the prophet is talking about diplomatic relations highway, of having peace with your neighbor.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I read these prophets, because so many of the prophets' prophecies have come true, I know that this is going to come true too, is just the way I view it. And I know it's hard in the now to accept this reality, because it's like, that is science fiction. That's not going to happen. But so is Jews who were oppressed in Europe and all over the world, in Africa and the Arab lands, everywhere where we were dispersed for nearly 2,000 years. If you would have told any of our Jewish grandparents, great-grandparents, that we are going to have a state and that we're going to be back actually not just in anywhere in the world and have our own state and liberty and freedoms, but it's going to be in your ancestral homeland, they would have laughed at us. They would have been like, what were you smoking? And yet here we are post that movement of Jews, the Shivat Zion and the come back to your land movements, the returning to your land movements in Jewish history. And it's like we defied what should have been. We should have been, with the oppression and all the pogroms, we should have been destroyed by the haters that we had and still have, unfortunately. And yet it's like God is the one who keeps having the final word. And he keeps proving to us, to his people, that, what I promised you, it's going to happen. You just have to have a little faith. And yes, it sucks because you're going through horrible persecution. It's not pretty. It comes with a lot of suffering. The Holocaust, October 7th, etc., the pogroms. But at the same time, you have to see the silver lining. And to me, that silver lining is doing the impossible, which is, as a human who is sick and tired of this suffering and pain, to trust that God has it under his control and that he will be faithful to the rest of what he promised us and what he prophesied through the prophets to his people. It will happen. And that's where I stand with that there is hope and there is going to be solutions that many times, we say, well, it's our air defense. Well, who gave those engineers the wisdom to come up with that defense? You know what I mean? Like sometimes we expect the miracle to be that God is going to, like, with his fingers, in the sky, go boop, 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 because because he's God. He can defy, he created the confounds of the reality that we live in, but he can, and he can also bend that reality. But I like to see the miracles in even the very simple everyday realities,
the small things,
and the small things, and getting up in the morning. That's a miracle, like we pray the Modani in the morning for religious Jews. Modani, that you created me, that you allowed me to restore life into me, because the view is that it's like a mini death. You have zero power to wake up in yourself. There are people who go to sleep and never wake up. That's a reality. And so, I'm saying it's looking for and recognizing the blessing in everyday life, in every aspect. Thank you, God, for this plant. Thank you, God, for the fruit that comes from the tree, the fruit from the earth. That thankfulness, that gratefulness.
So important.
It's so important.
Because
and it gives you that balance.
It reminds you of what you're fighting for. You as a soldier, like, what are you fighting for? Like, if you don't have something to fight for, then you don't have any motivation. Then you lose track. Like, you have to probably, I would assume that you would have to have a really good picture of what is it that I'm defending? What is it that I uphold as values? What is it that I try to uphold hold the line for?
Exactly.
What does it mean for me? Like Israel, what does it mean? It's more than just a piece of land. It's a people. It's an idea. It's values. It's the Jewish nation.
Yeah.
It's everything, right?
Exactly.
And I would imagine, and I'll just also want to ask you, like, just the picture that we drew here, where Israel is bombarded from everywhere, from all over. And if we zoom out, you see this little speck of a nation within all these Arab states, where a lot of them, not all, but a lot of them, like, hates Israel and just want to destroy it. Like, how come the world community doesn't sympathize more with Israel, and instead, like we were talking about earlier, like calling you guys like genocidal maniacs, and Israel is committing genocide? And how come we see that? What is your explanation for that? Why do people demonize Israel so much?
Yeah, because the truth of the matter is Israel is the underdog. Israel is the underdog in this fight, and instead the world powers, political leaders of different countries have a tendency to take the side of the Goliath, of the ones that are bent on our destruction. And the only thing that I can understand and rationalize is that it is a unexplainable, irrational hatred of Jews, which has been expressed in the term that we use, anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism, to understand what that means, because unfortunately it gets misused, I think, many times, where people just really do just criticize Israel, and then they get labeled as anti-Semites just for their criticism. So there is criticism that we as Jews need to be careful with, this knee-jerk kind of defense system of like, oh no, that's anti-Semitism. Yes. So just to kind of clear that away, that aside, there is a true anti-Semitic spiritual, demonic, unexplainable hatred of the Jew. It can't be expressed in any other way because there's no logic behind it. There's no rational behind it. Jews have embraced the society that they lived in as being wholehearted and full-blown contributors to the society, in embracing that society's worldview, that society's standards, and have put aside their Jewishness, have put aside their religion, and are like, hey, we're just like you, and they got hated. And then the ones who chose to be religious and to be in that society, but to have like a Jewish community within that society that's secluded and is religious and doesn't have any involvement with the society around it, and they're within their own shtetl or whatever, and they get persecuted. It's like literally everything we have tried throughout history, and it's not ethnic, because you have Black Jews, you have Asian Jews, you have white Jews, you have all ethnicities of Jews, and you're hated. So it's not because of the color of my skin. So that's unexplainable. To me, if you have a rational mind, the only answer is that there is what we said in the beginning here, you have to recognize that there is true evil in this world. And to me, that is a spiritual power. It's not a physical power. It gets manifested in physical ways through propaganda and lying and actions of violence and so on. It gets manifested in physical ways. But what motivates that evil? Where does it come from? People don't really ask these questions. They want to ignore it because it sounds too. It's not the kind of conversation we have in day-to-day society.
Sounds supernatural, right?
Sounds supernatural. And we don't like that. But it is supernatural. Demonic forces exist in this world. And to me, that is the power of darkness. Star Wars, for the Star Wars fans, right? The dark force, right, versus the light force. It's
the archetypal story.
Yeah. We tell these stories in Hollywood, and we're okay with it there.
Yes.
The Matrix or whatever, right? But these are real realities.
Yes.
There is a darkness and there is a light, and I believe that the light is coming from our Creator, God, and the darkness comes from as labeled, at least in Jewish thought, as the Satan or or fallen angels or whatever. So there is a darkness in this world trying to oppose what God created, trying to superimpose and say, no, I am God, right? And it is usually manifested in this kind of arrogance, and I can only rationalize this as this is a demonic force, and it manifests itself differently all over the world in little different ways. But specifically with Israel, it is the demonizing of the Jew, no matter what we do.
Yes.
Which we express as anti-Semitism.
Yeah.
But it's manifested in many different ways against us, and there's no rationale behind it. There's no logic. There's no truth behind it for sure. It's irrational hatred of the Jew, no matter what we do, and that's why again, the only grounding that I can find is in God, in His Word, and in knowing and understanding the why I'm here, the why I do what I do. And it gives you that grounding to juxtapose this madness and this insanity that unfortunately is plaguing much of society today. You see it all over you look at the eyes of people and ask them, why do you hate Israel so much? You see this pure hatred in their eyes, and like, why? Give me let's have a debate. Mm-hmm. Explain, talk.
They can't explain it.
They can't explain. They don't want to explain. And if you ask them, what does the river to the sea mean? They don't know, but it's a slogan they use. That Palestine will be, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. What does that mean to you? What does that mean? What river? What sea? What are you talking about?
It's almost like as if something has possessed them. Because I find that when I speak to people, like friends, people I've considered friends, like modern, rational people, and then we come to this topic, and something just happens, like their eyes go black. Yep. And they just attack you, and it's like it's not the same person anymore. Something has possessed them that they're not aware of.
Exactly. Because I think, again, to be clear, I don't think there's a bunch of possessed demonic people out there.
Yeah.
But like you pointed out very beautifully, that's exactly it. It's like they're normal people, but because I believe they haven't grounded themselves, like I said, in God's word, which to me is the grounding. Remember we talked about the electricity and the dangers? That's the danger, is that when you reject God, you open yourself up to this demonic influence that manifests on the issues that are important to that influence.
They're sitting ducks for that.
They're sitting ducks for that. And it's not like everybody is like that, but it's like they become like that when the conversation is led into that,
because they have no defense systems.
Because they don't have a defense system.
Like there's open prey.
They're open prey. Yeah, exactly. And that's why it's dangerous. It's these are very dangerous forces, and I think people need to be more aware of it. That this isn't just an issue. It's actually an issue that is for your own safety.
Yeah,
for your own mental and moral bearings.
Definitely. And as I said, like a couple hours ago, we're going in for a landing. But what's your comment on the last piece of thing? Like the latest couple of days, this here beeper attack. What are your thoughts about that? Because I thought it was Israel all over, like at once when I saw that, but lately the president of Israel went out and said it's not Israel who's behind it. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, being that I'm not involved in espionage, I wouldn't know.
Yeah.
But what I can tell you is that this attack is going down in the books, just like I said with the hostage rescue mission, that was really miraculous and new standards for the tier 1 community around the world to learn from, whatever they can learn from that. Because again, like I said, a lot of the things that can be gleaned rationally and tactically, sometimes when you look at our wars, you can tell there is a supernatural aspect that, well, I guess we can see what we can still learn from this. And in a way, that right there is just one of those operations that whoever conducted that operation and carried that out, it is genius. It is how to say. It's putting the terrorists. It is putting the terrorists in the terrorizing. They're putting them in their corner that they are doing to others. You have made your living on terrorizing others, on innocence, and guess what? Now, how does it feel like to be terrorized?
Yeah.
How does it feel like to have the uncertainty of any device I touch might blow itself up? That is ingenious to me, whoever carried this mission out. And I think that those are the type of missions and operations that need to keep being conducted against terrorism, because they have made us take off the gloves, so to speak, and we should keep our gloves off. There is no civil fighting uncivilized monsters.
Yeah.
And they need to be treated as such, and they need to be terrorized more and more and more. And tactics like this, to me, is really it is the perfect solution for such evil in this world.
And also you could say that this was the most hyper-targeted attack because it went directly towards the ones carrying this. And the ones carrying these pagers were part of the Hezbollah movement.
Yep.
And then and that way you can't be any more targeted than that. And yet and still, like, the Norwegian media and Western media all over, like, we're describing this as, look at this terrorist attack from Israel.
Exactly.
Look at what they're doing. Like, no matter what Israel does, it's still demonized.
Well, the one truthful thing is that it is terrorizing.
Yeah.
It's terrorizing the terrorists.
Yeah.
And that's what we need to do. And that's what the West, Tim Kennedy made this statement publicly on an interview. And I love that statement, and I agree with it 100%. The West has lost the will to win since the Second World War. And that's been expressed through all the wars that America has been involved in post the Second World War, and all the wars Israel's been involved in. We keep hitting our enemy in these like little strikes, like mowing the grass, as some call it, right? Just mowing the grass, but not really uprooting the evil from the root. And by doing that, it's because we've lost the will to win. Because to win means to do things that are not conventional, that are not ethically make me feel good. Okay, dropping bombs on Hiroshima, I doubt made any American proud and happy of the death of all of these innocent Japanese, or the airstrikes in Germany by the Allied forces. No pilot took pleasure in that, I guarantee you. Because being a warfighter, I know that's the last thing you want, is innocent people to be hurt. But that's what the will to win, that was what was needed at the time. Because if that kind of strike had not happened, and it was proven, because how long did the war last for? And it wasn't until after those kind of strikes, those very harsh blows, did the enemy lose the will to win against the West. Yeah? And that's what the West has lost, is the will to win against our enemy. And in doing so, we're actually prolonging we're prolonging the suffering for many people on both sides of these conflicts. And that's the reality. And so I think we need to regain the will to win and to exercise whatever tactic is deemed to be the one that's going to crush the will of your enemy and get it over with.
And what's also so ironic is that in the world society, world community, Netanyahu is portrayed as like this warmonger and so aggressive, is such a terrorist. All he wants is just blood, and is portrayed that way. But while actually inside of Israel, he gets a lot of criticism for not being aggressive enough, for not doing these wars early enough, for not starting this war earlier, for actually being more passive than he should have been.
Exactly.
So it's just upside down.
Preemptive.
Yeah.
You're right.
And also, I just wanted, for our listeners, because I forgot to ask you what kind of different divisions have you been in IDF? Like, what's your background, just so people get a picture of what you've done in IDF.
So I started my military service in the Southern Command in Givati. And so essentially we were the Gaza unit before the pullout from Gaza in 2005. Started my service there, served in the Gaza operations that were conducted during that time period. Then ended up in the IDF reserves in the Northern Command. And so from 2005 and onwards, I was involved in any of the reserve duty missions in the north, defending Israel's north against Hezbollah and other threats. And then ended up in the 98th Fire Battalion, which is comprised of the commando, the special commando units today, and other different fighting units. And that's essentially a branch of, if you like, of the paratroopers, but it's the elite of the paratroopers, and did that in reserves before I ended up leading up to with my unit, where we left and went on to create a unit similar to what we did there for the paratroopers. So when the war broke out, just shortly before the war broke out, we had accomplished the creation of this new unit within the paratroopers enlisted unit, not the reserves, which is very different and unique as well, because usually reservists don't serve within a non-reserve unit. So these were active duty soldiers, and the war broke out, and so we ended up going wherever the paratroopers were fighting in Gaza with the Gaza campaign. And then on our second deployment, we actually ended up continuing what we're doing, and then basically creating something that is more within our how would you say, capabilities, and more of our I'm trying to think of the word, but basically doing more what we prefer to do.
Yeah.
Through my commander, that has led us into another phase of operations, and so that's what we did in our second deployment. So a total of 10 months that my team of guys have been fighting, and have been doing the missions that we do, which I can't really discuss
that.
what.
But do you think you will be going out to the battlefield again, or?
Very possible, yeah.
Very possible, yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. If the North opens up with another front, which it's open, it's been going, but the military hasn't given a full response to. If that happens, then it's very likely that we'll be also joining the IDF in the operations against Hezbollah. Will
Israel survive this?
I already told you yes.
Yeah,
because that's what I believe, that that's what keeps me hopeful, that knowing that God has had the final word, so to speak. But the real question is, all of that aside, what people believe, think, what have you. At the end of the day, there is the post-war, and that is the greatest tragedy. Is that you had many of the victims who survived the October 7th attack, who have been so heavily burdened by mental health and struggling with the post-trauma of that, and that have essentially ended up taking their lives, including IDF soldiers who couldn't get back to reality after the horrors that we've seen.
Because of the darkness and the evil?
Because of all, it just, the trauma is too heavy. Yeah. And like I said, for me at least, what has kept me sane and able to overcome that, because we're all affected by that, especially if you've been actively involved from day one. You got to see the worst of it, and then if you're actively involved in the combat, then you're seeing it as well. And you can't guard yourself from that. We're not made for that. in a way, God created us to be able to fight wars. But what I'm saying is, it's not within our own ability to be able to heal after the war's over. And there's many ways that in cultures that have been more accustomed to war, they've had processes of post the wartime healing, and so they recognize that and dealt with it in their own ways. That's just a fun little something that I've learned from my last guest on my podcast, where she studied this in different cultures where she's been all over, and I find that fascinating and interesting. And that's something that Israel is trying to work on. We're trying to work on the post-war efforts, and that is it's going to be a long road for many of us. That's the reality.
But Doron, I want to thank you so much for coming here today and speaking to me and telling us about your experiences and your thoughts. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for this podcast, and thank you for speaking the truth.
Israel Chai.
Amen.
Thank you.